How's it going, everybody out there? World, YouTube land. My name's Carpo, for those who don't know. I usually only introduce myself when I'm making a Kratom video, knowing that people will probably watch that I'm not familiar with, or not familiar with me, but I'd like to cover a couple topics in this video about Kratom. There have been some, I meant to make this video about two or three, actually 3 days ago, I think, and I had all these notes, and then the next day I went and refined the notes, and then I lost the notes. So today, when I was coming to make the video, I'm like, okay, so the notes are gone. What do I do? I thought that they were in my book, but I was taking them on a separate piece of paper, and I really try to be informed and have notes of everything that I talk about, But anyhow, all I could do was just scribble these with, in a couple quick minutes to make sure I didn't forget some of the main issues. First off, I am a Kratom user and have been for about 7 years, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit later. But I've often been asked, are you going to quit, or would you quit, or will you quit, or do you have any intention on quitting, or could you make a video if you do, maybe of the process? And I've actually been considering it lately. Thought, taper down, make a video series, and compile it over, say, a month or so, and see if I can avoid, post-acute withdrawal symptoms and all the nonsense that comes with it. The thing is, there's going to be a little bit of lethargy and a little bit of feeling down anytime you quit using anything that you've been using for a long time. So, first off, 7 years is a really long time to be taking Kratom, and the big question I have is, why would I quit at all? And I understand for some people it's financial, they can't afford it, and maybe they take too much. For other people, they just feel like they need to be clean from everything. Others maybe just don't like the feeling. Others have quit just because of the only reason I've found, which is because it's addictive and because they don't want to be a slave to something. Well, here's what I'd like to say. Taking Kratom for 7 years sounds like a long time, but I was a smoker for 25 years. I've been a cannabis smoker for 30 years on a daily basis, both. I was, for a lot of this time, I have never been an alcoholic, thank goodness, but there have been, periods, especially over the last couple of years, where I've been drinking more than, I used to in the past, but it's not one of my main vices, I guess. So smoking and cannabis would be two of them, but also coffee, one that's often overlooked. And if I were to quit drinking coffee out of the blue, which has happened before, I just maybe don't have caffeine for a couple days, don't think much of it, and then I'm like, why am I so tired? Why do I have a headache? And I find out that, of course it's coffee. So that's a well-known one, and most people don't think much of it. Interestingly enough, even though Kratom acts similar to opioids, it's very different as well. It may affect the same receptors, the mu opioid receptors affected, but at the same time it's a much lighter massaging, if you will. So it has a ceiling effect, if you will, a limit as to how addicted it can get you and to how much it can affect the receptor, and taking more isn't going to change that. But another interesting thing that I found is that it actually affects other receptors. I believe it was the adrenergic receptors. I can't remember the whole detail because I don't have my notes, but it also affects the 5-HT2A receptors, which is interesting. A lot of substances do. The point being, I don't want to go into detail about the scientific effects on the brain, but rather saying it's a very wide stage of effects that it has on the human mind and body. And yes, different strains really do matter. Some people have been questioning that lately and asked me, do you think all strains are just the same thing? I was like, no, absolutely not. Some have more, some seem to trigger more, they have different effects, For example, people take, histamine release is very common with it. So, with the red strains, but not as much with the greens, and whites can be a little too racy, and so they generally have a certain level of effects that are different. But as to what a vendor labels it is anybody's guess, and yes, it has become the Wild West out there, and I'm almost reluctant to even talk about Kratom anymore because of how crazy it's become. And the market's just flooded with stuff. Some stuff's great and some stuff's crap, like always, but it seems like there's a lot more crap this just bright green, just standard Kratom, whatever you might, you know. And then people have been asking, do you think they'd mix it with green tea? I'm like, you know, I don't know what's going on over there. I really don't. I know that it's like a gold mine for Indonesians. So I'm very grateful to have the vendor I have had for a really long time, but that doesn't mean that everyone else does. And I realize that, and a lot of people are just getting into this and finding out about it. And it's an amazing plant, not just for pain. It's great for anxiety, depression, a variety of different symptoms. At least I've found it to be useful for these things. What's happened recently with Kratom? Well, a lot of you might know, or those who don't know me won't know, but I've been fighting for the Kratom legal, you know, keeping Kratom legal since back in 2016 when the DEA stepped in and decided they were going to make Kratom a Schedule I drug, and they were going to classify it and schedule it. We spoke up, got over 120,000 signatures on, you know, our petition, and they actually backed down. And now there's a lot of scathing hatred towards the FDA and the DEA in the community, Kratom community, but I've been watching closely and trying to be fair. So here's the thing, the DEA turned it over to the FDA. The FDA recently declared it is an opioid. It doesn't change anything, but it gave everybody the fear that, one, it's going to scare some people off from using it that might benefit from it, but two, that they may be the first step in a plan to ban it, right? And then others are saying, well, they're going to go state by state and ban it. Well, I feel like it's going to be like cannabis. It really is going to be a state by state issue, but I don't think the feds are going to step on it. And I may be totally wrong, but here's the most interesting point that I guess I have to make in this video that I found out. The DEA released their 2018 drug threat assessment, and I guess it's a 150-page paper. I believe that's how many it was, and it talks about all the threats within the the drug community, all the problems with cartels, importation, opiates, cocaine, marijuana, everything. And then it lacks one thing: Kratom. Nowhere is it mentioned in there. So think about this: with all the fear of the DEA being against Kratom, they released a huge assessment on drugs for the year and didn't even include Kratom at all, not even mentioned. That tells me that they are either just staying out of the controversy, or they actually have maybe done a little bit more research and they're a little bit more aware of the benefits. And maybe somebody made a smart decision to realize that this is something that really is helping and can help. For all those who are against it, I can understand when a person's had an addiction to Kratom, or somebody they know who has, or people say they've spent too much money on it, or it consumed their life. I'm like, look, people's lives are consumed by, by eating. People's lives are consumed by even just smoking cannabis, which to me is just something totally benign. It's like I can smoke pot and go on with my day. I don't have to sit and just smoke spliff after spliff, but some people do. It's an issue of the mind that causes us to overindulge in certain things. But it's more than that, because I give people credit. Some people are respectful, take proper dosages, and then they have a problem. Everyone's body is different, and all of our brain and body chemistry is different. We have several systems working here that are affected. Our dopamine, serotonin, acetylcholine, norepinephrine. We've got oxytocin, and a variety of different compounds which are all working together to kind of, create the entourage effect, if you will, which is hard to deny. We've been working to, patent single molecules for decades, but it just doesn't seem to affect us the way the whole plant does. And this is why we just want the plant left alone. But as for extracts, that's kind of an up-in-the-air thing. So, to try to cover all my points here, one issue that came up a few days ago was there was an article that came out that said a woman's newborn was born addicted to Kratom and went through withdrawal for 7 days, and after he had been treated for his withdrawal symptoms, they let him finally go home. I don't know the details of the mother, the father. Supposedly the father is the one that claimed she'd taken the Kratom, so who knows? I mean, was she taking opioids still and didn't want to say anything about it? I really don't know the specifics about why this happened and why the baby was born in withdrawal, but if it is true, and this mother said was taking huge doses of Kratom, maybe, and maybe small, I don't know, but that the baby was born with withdrawal symptoms. This is supposedly the second case, it leads me to not only be suspicious, but also say, if it is true, well, it's not, it could be another nail in the coffin for Kratom, but also another way of saying, look at how many babies are born addicted to opioids and cocaine and a variety of other things. This is a very small issue when it's 2 people. So I guess that one really isn't even worth mentioning, but I had to throw it in there because it's a concern of some people. You know, pregnancy is a time to be careful with anything. And I would say if you're taking Kratom, yes, be careful. If you're pregnant, you might want to not take Kratom. I mean, if you're in extreme pain, that could be a different story, and that's something you have to weigh as an individual. So addiction is an issue for some people, and people who have certain conditions may not want to take it. You know, we don't know enough about this yet, but it's not right to demonize the whole plant because one person had a problem. So what else do I have on my little thing? I guess I don't have really any more notes. Ohio apparently has an issue with Kratom, but it was the pharmacy board from what I understand. And the pharmacy board was having a discussion there about how to make Kratom either prescription or scheduled, or I don't remember the specifics, but really, you know, they should probably just stay out of it, but you know they won't. A lot of these local state governments are going to start sticking their nose in Kratom's business. But let me tell you, you know, there was one issue in Florida where the local police chief was asked about Kratom and whether he, you know, thought it was a problem, and he said, you know, Kratom seems to be helping people around here, and that I haven't seen anything to determine that, you know, anyone taking Kratom is a threat or it's a problem or a nuisance in our, you know, local community. And I think if our local, you know, law enforcement, as well as governors, senators, you know, everyone who represents us and is supposed to work for us can look at Kratom as a legitimate aid for some people, but beyond that, a pretty benign, non-harmful plant, then maybe we wouldn't have the issues we're having right now with, you know, even other vendors. I mean, I've had people ask me, you know, hey, do you take Visa? None of the vendors are taking Visa, and I say, you know, I haven't ever taken Visa. They can't, you can't get a processor legitimately in this country that does it unless it's some offshore hokey processor that charges you a fortune in fees and per transaction fees, monthly fees, setup fees. And you know, it's just not fair for a small timer. So it really puts it in the hands of the people who can afford the big time ones, and even taking risks with shipments, you know, huge shipments that may be confiscated. And even 3 years ago, they confiscated like a $400,000 shipment from someone. I can't remember which company, but that's a huge shipment of Kratom. Of course, that's according to their value. It was probably more like 40,000, since anybody who's had anything taken by customs knows that they boosted up 10 times what it's worth. But, you know, last year I tried to order some from Indonesia because I had a sample and I liked it, and I ended up getting like 60 kilos seized by customs, and they just destroyed it. I never got it back, only because it was mislabeled. So it's kind of a, I would say it didn't label it as Kratom, but it said it was green, you know, herbal powder. Thing is, that's enough for them to single it out and try to, you know, demonize it. And so going after the shipments and the vendors is a good way to scare people off. And so where do we stand now? A couple years have passed. The Kratom, I haven't mentioned the AKA, and I usually don't in my videos, only because it's just controversial for a lot of people to even talk about it. I know a few of my subscribers who have said, hey, you know, these people are doing all they can to help Kratom, support them, and I say I completely agree. But at the same time, I feel like it's important to point out the issues they've had in the past handling their money, and wondering why they keep scaring people by saying it could be tomorrow, it's going to happen. You know, every little thing that happened with Kratom, the AKA was all over it asking for donations. And, you know, I'm suspicious by nature generally, but not that suspicious. I asked several questions and had a few of my threads like shut down and deleted and whatnot, and had some pretty like half-assed answers. So that's why I developed my suspicions. And the only reason I mention that is because it bummed me out to think, even in, you know, you got to be smart in this industry. you can't just think that there's a bunch of friendly Kratom users out there who are all out to help each other, because that ain't the reality. There are some unscrupulous fucking vendors who will rip you off, right? No buts about it. In fact, somebody sent me, God, what was it? An email the other day saying one of my customers. He said, you know, hopefully I won't get ripped off like I did with this other lady. I can't remember her name. I wouldn't even mention it anyway. And she had some company where apparently, pardon me, she had everyone sign up to buy with Bitcoin, and she had this great deal, like $25 for, you know, half kilo, quarter kilo, I don't know what it was. And so she said, you know, everybody make their payments first and then we'll ship it all out. And the point is, she never sent any of them out, I guess. And the person told me that they kept emailing her and never got a response, and nobody got their product. Well, when I Googled her name, it didn't come up with just actually the customers didn't come up that she'd ripped off. It was an Indonesian company who had filed an online complaint against her for not paying them for like thousands of dollars worth of Kratom. So basically ordering some overseas saying, hey, I'll pay you later, knowing that the business was going under, and saying, well, I'm taking everyone down with me, you know, burn the life rafts kind of thing. And those kind of people, you know, you just wonder, these are the same kind of people who might not be able to obtain a certain strain of Kratom that they usually sell for a higher price, and so therefore say, well, I'll just take some of this other green and call it Mang Da or whatever. And you know, who really knows anymore what anything is? You know, I've just kind of I let Kratom speak for itself. Even if I know a strain is really good, I'm cautious and I'm wary. You know, they do change over time. I mean, harvests vary. You can't always get the same strain. So when you do find something good, stock up on it. But you know, names are just names, and I'm really careful about what I take, what I want to ingest into my body, and take it on a regular basis. Yeah. I have run out a couple times for a few days, but I've never quit long term. And so I guess that's where I should finalize this video. It's been kind of long, and I hope I made all the points I needed to make. It does affect our body a lot more complicated than, say, taking, you know, Vicodin. Or, for example, when you take oxycodone or you take Vicodin, it's a different effect. It feels different, but they both do the same thing, right? And usually if you have a tolerance to Vicodin, they might give you oxycodone instead. Or some people are allergic to one or the other. Well, they're both derived from, like, the same source. Like the opium poppy has a variety of different things in there. Codeine, which is better for coughs. And that's, before I go, that's another thing I'd like to mention. The studies, there's two main compounds. There's mitragynine, and then there's 7-hydroxymitragynine, okay, within Kratom. These are the main studied alkaloids. And these are out of about 25 alkaloids that are found in Kratom, from what I understand. Who knows what they all do in their own way. And there's speciopholine, which was studied in the 1960s, and patented, like, to work on, like a temporary patent to study. I mean, it's been well known that this plant has, you know, benefits, but each component has its own benefits. Just like codeine is good for cough, they found that 7-hydroxymitragynine is really good as a cough suppressant. But not, you know, mitragynine itself might not be as good. Well, in the plant, between like 0.5% to 1.5% on average, say 1% on average, mitragynine in the leaf material. Inside that, there's like 1/10 of that much, say like 0.2% or whatnot, 0.1% of the 7-hydroxymitragynine. Well, it can be apparently, you know, used by itself, of course, when it's extracted down. I've personally found it not to be as effective by itself. But the interesting thing is, I read somewhere in this little science journal, I can't remember where it was, but it said that it's believed that 7-hydroxy is much more addictive than mitragynine itself. And so my thought was this: okay, there's some plants out there that are going to have a much higher ratio of mitragynine to 7-hydroxy. And so if a person's taking a particular strain for a long time that, say, has much lower of the 7, then maybe they would be able to quit no problem without having the same withdrawal effects as the person who's taking one that has higher 7-O mitragynine, 7-hydroxy, whatever. Point being that different compounds within the plants might have different addictive potentials, or rather, not addictive, but withdrawal, like effects. To me, Kratom is fascinating. It's a wonderful plant. It's the only plant in the world that I would revere right next to cannabis, which is my love. I mean, cannabis I rarely talk about, but it's been a fascination of mine since, I was 14 years old and I discovered it. The effects of it were one thing. I was fascinated with the different types and studying terpenes and writing reports on it and trying to understand how these things work and why there's 100 different smells, and why the highs are different with the different smells, and how terpenes may affect cannabinoids, and the cannabinoids are affecting each other, and the CBD, THC, and now I'm into CBN, as you can get it by aging your cannabis like fine wine, So I have some 3-year-old cannabis, and then I made some alcohol extract, and then I, purified that down to a little clumpy tar, and I put that on a bowl, and oh my God, it knocks me out. I mean, CBN is really good for sleep, apparently. So anyhow, I'm getting off topic. The point is, I was going to compare cannabis to Kratom in the way that Kratom, I believe, has... Although the smells are different, and of course the look and texture is different because of the grind, and the leaves are different. There's horned leaves, regular leaves, and there are different colors of veins. But generally a leaf's a leaf once it's ground into a powder. The effects are where it's at, and that's how we know that Kratom's effective. People have told me, well, I've tried Kratom and it didn't work for me. I'm like, well, maybe it doesn't work for you. But I'm assuming maybe you just got bad Kratom, because it's always worked for me. I do have a few personal emails that people ask me, I've tried Kratom and it, what's a good dosage? And I say, I can't give dosage advice, I won't do that. They'll say, but the one thing I do say, they say, well, I've been taking it and it tends to not work as well, I have to take more. Does it develop tolerance? Everything you take develops tolerance. Almost every medication you take, anything, it's all... your body will adjust to it, and that's a good thing, because your body is trying to kind of compensate there, and kind of like they say, you'll never get that first buzz again. It's true. Your body does compensate and you adjust, but the thing is, Kratom is very similar to cannabis in regards to its tolerance level. It only goes up to a certain point, and then it levels off, and every day I take the same dosage. Every single day. I mean, I might adjust it just for the heck of it if I want a little more energy, or to chill out a little more. But my doses are about 5 grams usually. And it's been that way for 7 years. I've gone back and forth from maybe 4 grams up to, 7 grams or so, like a heaping tablespoon, maybe even up to 8 with some really crappy stuff. But I found, to me, it's worth it to pay as much as I can, or as much as I have to, rather, sorry. Never as much as you can. To make sure that I get the best product that's not only strong, but has been tested for molds, bacteria, and a variety of problems that we can have, taking a plant every day. So, I bid you farewell. It's been a long video. Hope you've maybe learned something or taken something away if you've made it this long. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them down below. And if you, what do you think about about the idea that something I've been taking for 7 years hasn't caused me any grief or heartache? I sleep well at night. I feel awake and coherent in the day. And I see no reason to quit, other than the fact that people say, if you ever do have to quit, you might go through withdrawal. And to me, that's not a good enough excuse, good enough reason. If someone were to say, well, then you could go back to just being normal, not always having to take something. I'd say, well, I'd have to quit coffee and cannabis and, and stop taking mucuna and herbs and a variety of other things. Kratom is so mild compared to everything else in life that I get a bigger buzz off of, say, a cigarette if I were to smoke a cigarette. And by the way, I said I was a smoker for 25 years. I did quit, actually, 3.5 years ago now. I started vaping. But, vaping's just another habit, but it keeps me grounded, keeps me somewhat sane, I'm not perfect. I've got my flaws. I got my issues and my addictions. But, oh no, now I got dead battery. nothing worse than dead batteries, but I just ordered 4 new ones. So anyhow, I turned this video into a ramble, but I know it should be an informative Kratom video. But I just wanted to tell a little bit of my story as well, and how I feel about it. I don't think of this plant as a big deal at all. It's just unbelievable what a big deal that's been made out of it. To me, it really is just like taking a cup of coffee, you know, a few times a day, however many times a day, or whatever. It just blows my mind that we're so hung up on the idea of taking something that resembles something else or has an effect similar to something we know is a problem, opiates, and you know, demonizing it because of that. It's just kind of like, well, oh, you take Kratom? Whatever. You know. So what do you all think? So thanks to my subscribers, thanks to my friends, thanks to everyone, my patrons. I appreciate you all, and have a wonderful day. Take care now.